And this month's Where Did the Road Go is sponsored in part by Allison Cook, Super Inframan, and Eric Hervin. Thank you all so much for your support. And if you want to become a patron and help support Where Did the Road Go, you can do so at wheredidtheroadgo.com. It's only $3 a month. You get extra content all month. You can also support the show through donations off the website or pick up some merch. All available at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? Tonight I have with me Mr. Red Pill Junkie.
Buenas noches.
And Joshua Cutchin.
At special request.
So, this is going to be more or less a wandering the road type of episode. And where do you guys want to start?
With regards to things that have been transpiring or circulating in UFO Twitter over the last few weeks, I kind of felt compelled the other day to create a meme that I shared through social media, also for the Daily Grail website, in which basically they're reminding people that one does not have any obligation to believe alien experiencers' stories. But at the same time, the other side of the coin is you don't also have to disbelieve them.
Right.
That there is this thing in social studies, particularly in philosophy, in this brand of philosophy called phenomenology, which is called making the cut. And this is something that Jeffrey Kripal mentions in his books. I believe he particularly wrote a whole chapter about it in the book Supernatural.
Yes, he did.
Which he co-wrote with Lestriver.
Yes.
So that for people who want a really, really good explanation of what making the cut is, go to read that book. But trying my best to summarize it is reaching this state of mind in which you enter into a certain let's call it a belief system. Let's call it like a religion. Which is something that people who study are into religious studies do all the time, in which you enter into these claims and affirmations of meetings with celestial beings, angels, demons, whatever, having the writings of saints and mystics, and the academic, they are not. They're not believing these accounts per se. They're like trying to reach this almost like a Zen type mental state, in which they enter into this world and to try to study, to try to understand it, but without making any kind of like the typical judgment that we feel so obsessed with making all the time, especially in the Western world. Oh, this is a lie. Oh, this is mere fiction. Oh, maybe. This is these are the facts. Oh, this is the God-given truth. These academics, they leave all that behind and they just study this material without making any judgment. And that is what is called making the cut. And this is something that is so lacking in ufology nowadays, I feel.
Not to toot my own horn, but I think I do that. Like I have a lot of stuff that I present, and it's like, well, look, this is odd, but I remain pretty agnostic about it. And to that end, I've been giving this some thought, and I think that you see this a lot of times. I've been noticing it in the Bigfoot community. Like, it comes up that, there's a rumor that, Bob Gimlin told somebody that the Patty film is fake and it's going to be released on his death. It's going to come out. And I'm like, okay, so, like, it's these people who tend to make their entire career, orbit around one single case that I think are really walking into the lion's den on this. I think it's a lot more sensible to take a look at trends, big, broad trends, and that's where you stake your claim. And then you say, well, if, even if 30% of these aren't true and the other 70% are, then the trend is still there, good example with me, like I wrote a Trojan Feast. The Joe Simonton pancake story is a big part of that book. If it comes out tomorrow that Joe Simonton faked it, I'll say, huh, and move on. Because even though I love that case, it's there are so many other cases that embody aspects of that. And furthermore, I find it interesting. This is something that sort of has come up in my mind with the Travis Walton thing, which we don't necessarily need to jump to now, but to me, it's more interesting the expression of these motifs over and over again than the validity of any single case. You know what I mean? I don't care if a single case is true. I care about the motifs that are expressed that harken back to older stories that the people who are describing their experiences should have had no access to or are unlikely to have accessed. And what that says about the human condition, that these archetypes keep coming up over and over and over again, even in lies. I find that more interesting than the objective reality of every single given case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there are people within ufology that there seem to be in this crusade of trying to get rid of all the UFO stories that are not backed by a convincing body of evidence. Like, I don't know, Majestic 12, Roswell, Travis Walton. Pick any famous case in the annals of ufology, and these people say, well, it is not backed by tangible evidence. We need to get rid of it in order to try to clean the house and move forward. And I understand the rationale behind this, but at the same time, I feel I'm kind of scared of those kinds of trends, because it feels how easy it will be for those kinds of trends to turn into some kind of like inquisition, of erecting themselves as some kind of like judge or some kind of like court in which they decide which case is quote unquote real and which case is quote unquote pure hearsay, a hoax, a pure story. And the other thing is that trying to get rid of the lies, quote unquote, and the mythology that has been created in the field for the last 70 years. I feel that it will leave the world poorer and duller. I really don't think I would like to live in a world in which we have to get rid of folklore and mythologies and stories just because there is not enough tangible empirical evidence to substantiate them.
Okay. I think there are some cases that are such blatant nonsense that we can eliminate them. But something like Roswell, like I have very little confidence anything extraterrestrial happened at Roswell, but what makes Roswell interesting is something crashed there. Mm-hmm. So, trying to find out what crashed there, which my best guess at this point is it was an experimental craft of some sort, maybe even piloted by Japanese POWs.
Right.
And but also to look at how, the psyops around it, like how this has been used over the years to kind of like mislead people and stuff like that. And we can learn from that type of stuff. Because that's not going away. I mean, if anything, they've doubled down on it.
No, I would agree with that. And I would take that one step further and say that even if Roswell has nothing to do with extraterrestrial, quote unquote, flying saucers, that it still becomes so embedded in the phenomena that it sort of retroactively becomes associated with flying saucers. And what I mean by that specifically is I'm trying to track this down. If anybody listening can point me in the right direction, please do. But I have it on relatively good authority from someone I respect that the first incident of a car engine being shut down by UFOs occurred in fiction.
Yes.
I don't know exactly.
I don't remember where though.
Okay, so yeah, if anybody knows where that is, comment in the add a comment in the video down below.
I also remember, I think that there is this stage play in which there is like a major blackout in a city after there's like a bullet in the sky.
There you go.
Passing through. And in the stage play, one of the characters says that it was a message to mankind or something. I'm paraphrasing here. But I think that after that, the great New York City blackout, I think it was 1960, I won't say, I don't remember the 7, possibly.
Either 7 or 9, I think.
Something like that happened, and there are definitely accounts claiming that there was UFO activity surrounding this event.
Now, of course, none of this has to do with comets being portents of death in worldwide cultures. Nothing to do with that at all, right?
Right, exactly.
But I guess what I'd said that that's really also illustrative of this point is that, therefore, with that same frame of mind and the way that the phenomena seems to pivot towards our expectations, Roswell becomes a UFO case, even though it never was in some sense. And you will find subsequent cases that confirm aspects of Roswell because the phenomena is reflecting back on that incident. And this is Josh's typical goofy, imaginary dichotomy that he likes to set up. But I think that there's something to it. I really do.
There is something that showed up first in an episode of The Outer Limits, and then actually showed up in real life, and I don't remember what it was.
There's some allusions that Betty and Barney Hill were influenced by an episode of Outer Limits, right?
Maybe that's what it was.
Yes, there is a lot of hearsay that they saw one of those episodes, and that that influenced Betty's dreams, and Betty influenced Barney. To my mind, it's never been 100% confirmed, and I think what we're trying to say, by now it will never be fully confirmed.
No,
whether they saw it or not.
But again, I think that my stance might be what's going on there, because if you look at Betty's history, she had a weird childhood. Her grandmothers were weird. Her sister had a bunch of her sister's children, I believe, had a UFO sighting before she had her abduction. Their house was haunted. Betty predicted several classmates' deaths in high school. Her parents' second date, I think, was to a spiritualist meeting. This is somebody who was already deep, even if she wasn't actively in these topics. She was deep in these topics, and then perhaps drawing upon that image of the Outer Limits, it reached out to her in that form. It would be my stance. It sort of said, "Hey, you've been watching this TV show. Let's pick from this,"
Or it's also that co-creation thing that we can't see these things as they are, so our brain is picking things that it looks similar to.
Right, yeah. And whether that's her or that's some sort of third party phenomena is up for intellectually honest debate.
Absolutely.
Right. I mean, maybe Betty and Barney never saw that Outer Limit episode per se, but the fact that it already was part of the culture, one wonders if it doesn't have certain effect. Nevertheless, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I guess in the sense of, I don't know, I'm here in a pure speculation, people, but maybe in the sense of someone who hasn't watched any episode of The Simpsons, but he's still influenced by The Simpsons because The Simpsons are part of the culture. So I do wonder if, there is something that popular culture does, even if people are not directly exposed to it.
Yep. I think it's because I've been thinking about this a lot, with twin toddlers, about like, where did I first learn the phrase, put your hands in the air like you just don't care? I don't know where that comes from, but through just cultural osmosis, you pick up these things. And it's just like, a knock-knock joke. When did you hear your first knock-knock joke? I can't tell you when.
Well, that's the morphogenic field theory, too, to a degree.
To a degree, yeah. The 100 monkey and all that jazz. At what point a certain, let's call it a meme, because obviously by now the alien gray face is one of the most explosive and powerful cultural memes in our society. At what point the meme reaches some kind of like critical threshold, critical mass, that it starts to have a global effect.
And that there's also the idea of, what am I trying to think of here? Not a tulpa, but an
egregore?
Yeah, an egregore.
Yeah.
I mean, information reality is made of information. So when enough of it gets out there, it may just get picked up on. And this stuff likes to mimic, too. So when people have real weird experiences, this stuff may be mimicking stuff it's finding in the information.
Yeah. Yeah, and even if these ideas are just too woo-woo, I also think about, for example, I love watching very old engravings of animals that were done in medieval times and also during the Renaissance. Depictions of creatures that were seen by European mariners when they ventured into, trips to Asia, Africa, Oceania, and they come up with these tales of, like, I don't know, a giraffe. And then you see these medieval ancient depictions of these animals, and obviously they look nothing like the actual animal per se, right? Because the artist never looked into them. But these depictions, nevertheless, you obviously recognize them. You can almost tell the time period because there's a certain style, there's a certain way of interpret things that is very dated in art, and one wonders, whether when Betty described her captors to someone, and maybe those someones, they were very steeped in science fiction, and maybe those people were the ones who saw that Outer Limit episode. So you see what I'm getting at? That's like how we interpret very fringe phenomena really is determined by our time and place in culture. Like, imagine trying to describe a gray to a Japanese engraver from the 16th century. How will they have, interpreted that?
Yeah. Did you also say you've never seen an episode of The Simpsons?
No, it was just an example. Yeah,
okay, all right.
I've seen The Simpsons.
Because
I stopped watching The Simpsons like 10 years ago.
Right, but it would be weird if you'd never seen an episode. Plus, how are you going to know what the future holds unless you watch The Simpsons?
Exactly, I know, right? I've never seen Twin Peaks, though, to my shame.
Never seen what?
Twin Peaks.
Oh, Twin Peaks, really? That's right, I remember you saying that.
Mm-hmm. So I need to remedy that.
Yes. So the thing about believing or not believing, there's no way to really know. So I think what Josh said about, taking the overall skew of things is far more important, because it does take out okay, if this case is false, it doesn't matter because these 9 are true. And especially when you see the same stuff coming up across culture and across time, chances are it's not all hoaxes. When Robert Schoch was on talking about the psi research and the fact that psychics do better in laboratory settings when there's high solar activity, he said, so one of two things is true: either psi is real, or there's been a centuries long conspiracy for psychics to only do good when there's high solar activity. Which is more likely,
And there's also the case that as parapsychologists know that when skeptics or people that are very skeptical in nature, when they try to perform these experiments, they not only perform below average, their performance is so bad, almost like a negative trend. It's almost like they are so against the sheer possibility of psychic phenomena being real that there's something in their minds prevented them from validating that. So they are really going to perform even lower than your average results. And this is something that parapsychologists already know and they expect it. But of course, if you say that to a skeptic, like say, in order to perform well in a psi experiment, you need to believe in psi. They will think that's just cognitive bias, and they think, oh well, you're just prejudice, and you are already expecting to be fooled, so therefore, you're going to do the experiment wrong.
The thing is, we have no idea what reality is or how it works. The problem with the big S skeptics is that they think they do.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't know what the UFO phenomena really consists of. We don't know what it is or what these people are experiencing. And, we may never know, but we can speculate. We can try and make this stuff useful to help other people who are going through similar experiences. And I don't think just, criticizing everyone's experience and trying to judge it real or not is the answer. I mean, I've said it before, I'd rather believe someone who's lying than not believe someone who's had a real experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let me ask you this, Seriah. I know that you already told us before we started recording that you haven't followed the story of these. How do you say it, Josh? Anjali?
Oh, Anjali?
Anjali.
I don't know. You're the one whose language has a bunch of teal days in it. You tell me.
Anjali.
Yeah, it's A-N-Y-J-A-L-I, I think.
Something like that. I'm not. Although her real name is Angelia.
Mm.
So this is a person that erupted rather recently in ufology with all these sorts of very wild claims, and she's. I haven't followed the story that closely, mainly not because I don't believe her necessarily, or believe her. Like I said, that I have no judgment. It's just that I don't find that story that interesting.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, she's trying to organize, I think, this sort of expedition to the Mojave Desert with a group of people that are going to go and meet some aliens inside a cave or something like that. So how do you react, Seriah, to a person who comes up with these kinds of claims and they say they're going to organize this trip and they want people to help them?
It definitely raises red flags. Absolutely, in a case like that. It doesn't mean that she didn't have an experience. It doesn't mean that, she might completely believe what she's saying, but it also sounds like a scam.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If I might be allowed to interject,
yes, you can.
I finally put my finger on what separates believable stories from unbelievable stories for me. And while trying to hold my feet to the fire, whenever I come across something that doesn't conform to my opinions of the subject, I feel like I can come from an intellectually honest point of view and say that I have a problem when people start to get really elaborate with their cosmologies and this stuff. By which I mean is like, I will believe you all day if you say, I seem to remember them saying this to me, and the aliens said that they were different factions, but I don't know if I don't know how I feel about that. And I seem to recall this. It seems this way. It feels this way. Mike Cleland is great at this, right? He always says,
oh yeah.
And if Mike has had his experiences and can say, it seems to me, maybe it might be, then I think we can all do that. But I get a real problem. I have a real problem when people come in and say, yes, the Plizinobians are from the planet Zukal, are fighting the Griznonks from Geltoid Prime. And it's like, I just, that's when it starts to sound like bad science fiction to me, and that's when I shut down. So stories like the one that Anjali is telling, definitely sort of start pushing that threshold for me.
Yeah, I agree completely.
I also think when it sounds like it's a money-making deal, not so much trying to elucidate a real experience or even being paid for talking, that's fine. But when it's like, oh, well, like how many times have we seen these gatherings and stuff that are based around someone's kind of sketchy belief system? I mean, it almost becomes cultish after a while.
Yeah, for sure. But there's also, for example, the case of this guy, this Peruvian contactee, Sixto Paz. So when he started in the 1970s with his group Misión Rama, they invited a whole bunch of journalists, members of the press, to go to the Atacama Desert to meet the aliens. Basically, almost like what Anjali is promising. And there were a lot of people. Maybe there was a slow news season then. There were a lot of people who went there, and as you will expect nothing happened for a lot of days. So most of them got tired, picked up their stuff and left. A few stubborn people remained, and they actually filmed a few weird lights in the sky. I'm not saying, that proves that Sixto Paz was telling the truth. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that sometimes it's very difficult
to separate one from the other.
Yeah, to definitely say that person is 100% full of BS.
Right.
Like even George Adamski. I think that we three are of the agreement that he was making stuff with all these meetings with aliens, and,
sure.
and his philosophy had already been written in other books even before he claimed to have met Orthon the Venusian.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you can say with 100% certainty that he never actually had some kind of weird experience that prompted him to go and adopt this persona. It's difficult. Sometimes I even wonder if there's this phrase, "fake it till you make it."
Yeah.
I wonder if that doesn't also apply to the UFO phenomenon.
I mean, Hansen would say yes. That's a very George P. Hansen thing, the idea that fakery can bring in legitimate phenomena.
So a phrase I really hate is when someone will say, well, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, because I think that gets applied to things that aren't necessarily extraordinary claims. If someone says they saw Bigfoot, I don't feel in this day and age that's an extraordinary claim. Enough people have seen Bigfoot throughout the human history that's not that extraordinary. Now, when you had the screaming alien guy, who I can never remember the name of, who claims, the UFO showed up in the woods, ripped his dog in half, he shot it, stuck it in his freezer, et cetera, and then nothing is lining up to his evidence. Okay, those are extraordinary claims that need extraordinary evidence.
Well, and I mean, it's almost a variation on that sort of elaborate story, that I mentioned earlier. I mean, just it's my belief in stories tends to fall down to two things: how simple is the story and how weird is the story, right? So if it's really simple and it's weird, then I believe it. So if somebody comes up to me and says, my cat said hello, Bob, the other day, and it's the only thing that happened, I kind of believe it because it's simple, it's short, it's to the point, and it's super weird,
Right. So go ahead.
It's difficult to say how one begins to build a mental BS sensor, inside your head. I don't know how one does it. I guess it's like you guys said, like reading a gazillion cases, starting to form this kind of like backbone of ideas about how the phenomenon behaves. So when you come across something new, you begin to correlate this new story with the things that you already were exposed to.
Right.
And that's when you start to say, well, this passes the smell test, or so this sounds like total, horse manure. I guess it also comes from experience. I don't know if that means with age. Sorry to say it to younger folk listening to this, but maybe with age comes a certain amount of wisdom that allows to say, well, this person sounds like a total fraudster, but this other person, I'm not going to, pass judgment just yet. And maybe the thing is that we shouldn't pass judgment just yet to anyone. This is the thing what we started with, that you should always, for the amount of time possible, try to refrain from judging and to keep things in your gray basket. That's where I keep 99% of the UFO stuff I've been exposed to, and I think that's probably the healthiest way to go about this thing without going insane, and also without going into senseless crusades of saying, oh, I'm going to defend this case that I feel 100% that is true, like, for example, the Travis Walton case. Or people who are on the other side of the spectrum say, no, I'm going to prove once and for all that Travis Walton was a liar and that he was in cahoots with so-and-so in order to win this prize for the National Enquirer. And it's like,
right.
You want to go ahead into these wars, go ahead. I think I have better things to do.
Dr. Jonathan Reed was the name of the guy with the screaming alien. So if anyone wants to look up that story, they can see what I'm talking about. And the thing is, that story is so completely outside of anything else that we have. It doesn't fit the folklore. It doesn't fit the other. It's right. It doesn't fit at all in any way. It's just this anomaly. And on top of that, he lied about so much very obvious stuff. It comes across as a very clear fake.
Yeah, I don't want to say that things can't have an antecedent in folklore, but man, it's always such a stronger case that there's something legitimate to it, for me at least, when it does.
But not even an alien experience, alien UFO type of experiences. His was completely different.
Well, that's what I meant by folklore. With all the love in my heart,
Now, what about someone like Greer, Stephen Greer? I mean, because it seems like Greer believes what he's saying. And going out and sitting in a field looking for UFOs, you very well may see something. You know, there is something to that sort of intent sort of thing. I mean, Ritzman talked about that, but at the same time, Greer comes across like a used car salesman, and he's clearly tried to profit off of this, whether it's real or not. So where does he fit into all this?
It's a difficult question because, I agree. There's a lot of things in Stephen Greer as a person that I deeply dislike. He wants to erect himself as a guru-like individual, not like martial upper white per se. I mean, I don't think that there's any risk of Greer ever asking his followers to kill themselves.
Right, yeah.
But at the same time, that his ego is so inflated with all these claims that, he is the one that has to bring disclosure to the world because that's what the aliens want. He was appointed by them to be the emissary to mankind. It's like, that to me is maybe one of those red flags or part of my personal, very subjective BS meter. Like, when you see that inflation of the ego, is that there's when one needs to treat with caution. But like you said, at the same time, I cannot dismiss Greer entirely.
Right.
Because, we have talked to friends of ours who are very well versed in magical practices, and they say, well, Greer has this method that seems to be copied or morphed from older magical traditions. And regardless of his ego, it seems that these, CE5 protocols, they actually do work from time to time. I don't want to say all the time.
No,
because
definitely
I'm sure
not.
that maybe, like we're saying, of sometimes fake it till you make it. And so how shamans are known to trick people, using sleight of hands, chicanery, in order to do their things. I'm sure that on some occasions Greer uses flares or other methods in order to, propitiate the appropriate state of mind of the people who go to his events.
I wouldn't even have thought of that. I mean, because if you stand outside long enough, you're eventually going to see a light move across the sky. It might be a satellite, it might be a meteor, but, it seems like from what I've heard, Greer will take any light and be like, ooh, that's the mothership,
I think that there's something to be said for the shaman angle that Miguel was pointing out. But, George P. Hansen calls it like the sham of shamanism. And specifically looking at something like the spirit healings or the spirit psychic surgery rather. That you see where there's a lot of sleight of hand involving chicken giblets or something else that looks like it's something pulled out of the body. But this came up in the Where Did the Road Go Slack a couple of days ago, and my take, which is sort of a paraphrase of what Hansen would say, is that people getting something like psychic surgery expect to see something, so they expect to see a physical result. So a physical result is provided even though it's fake. And what that does, I think, is that it empowers the imagination, which invites the imaginal in there to sort of bridge the gap, the genuinely anomalous phenomena. Because, you could have them like wave their hands over you and say, yeah, you're all cured. And that might not trigger the magic, and I mean literal magic, of the placebo effect. That might not trigger the actual paranormal phenomena, the paranormal actual internal healing to take place, if there isn't something visual to have the patient actually, say, oh, it did work. And then that's when everything else steps in to bridge that gap.
Well, it's the ritual aspect of ritual magic. It's there to put you in the right state of mind. It's not doing it itself. It's another level that's actually the magic part of it.
Right. And if there is not as if there is no ritual magic also in modern medicine, right?
True.
I mean, I'm thinking right now of how maybe, 50, 60 years ago, there used to be more doctors that performed house-to-house calls, and they still have to bring in their stetometer and their little black
bag.
Medical kit, their medical bag. And now people, they actually go to the clinic, they go to the hospital, and the doctor, they have to wait in a room, like almost like like when you go to see the priest, and you have to go and sit inside the confessional before the priest goes and you tell him your sins. Right now, the sins in modern medicine is, bless me, doctor, for I have sinned. I drank 3 bottles of wine last weekend, and I ate 6 cheeseburgers, and now instead of giving you to pray 6 Holy Marys and 3 Our Fathers, now go. They write something, and they ask you to perform this ritual in order to heal.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. And to sort of like your house call moment that you were talking about, I think a lot of us think about like folk remedies for things as being like superstitious and goofy to a point, but part of me wonders, there had to have been some basis for at least some of them, and some of them obviously do still work today. Like literally, like you can, a doctor will never prescribe them, but some of them will still work today. But I kind of wonder if a lot more of them didn't have efficacy in the past when there was belief that they would work. And then for some reason since then, as we sort of started viewing this as more superstitious, as we sort of discovered the germ and discovered all these other different things, if we started saying, there's no way that these remedies could work, and then the remedies didn't work.
Right.
Yeah.
And look at Edgar Cayce. He was a guy who came up in a trance with these various cures that actually seemed to work for most people. So was that because they believed in it, or was he actually picking up on some weird thing that actually was going to help them?
Yeah. This thing about the folk remedies is something that parapsychologist Stanley Krippner has studied a lot. Stanley Krippner is, I think he's a Canadian parapsychologist, but he also was involved in the Maimonides Institute in New York. So he performed a lot of experiments with dreams. And he's also studied shamanism at length. I think he was one of the last persons who saw Maria Sabina when she was still alive here in Mexico. But yeah, there's a few episodes of Stanley talking with Christopher Ryan in the podcast Foundation Speaking, in which they discuss these folk remedies to get rid of warts,
right?
And how. Like I think the Irish remedy is cutting a potato and rubbing it in the wort, and then you have to bury the potato and for a while. And I think you have to do other things, but Stanley says, most of these remedies do work because of people believing in them.
Yeah,
and this is something that it's so tragic that modern medicine doesn't take a look at them. One of those doctors who actually took a look at them, I think, wrote a book in the 1970s, Life of a Cell, I think it is. And he said, if modern medicine could be able to harness that power, the power of the mind, be able to target specific clumps of cells, in this case, the cells that conform a wart in the skin of the patient. And if we could do that with cancer cells, well, we'll be able to teach people how to get rid of tumors just with the power of their beliefs.
Yeah. So, Josh, you had mentioned a couple of phrases that I think you should explain a little, because I'm sure lots of people who don't understand the difference, which is between the imaginal and the imaginary.
Well, I'm not entirely sure that I understand the difference between the imaginal and the imaginary. It's something that I grasp at, and I can sort of provide examples, but I'm kind of talking sideways about it every time I do, and I don't know if I can really apply it to my daily life. But I actually have an excerpt here from Patrick Harper on that. Oh. He says, it is easy to imagine another kind of reality, of truth. For example, whenever we watch a drama on stage or screen, we feel that we are watching a revelation of some deeper reality, normally concealed in the muddle of our mundane lives. Even if it is not great art, we still, astonishingly, suffer all the emotions of suspense, joy, pity, and terror. We are seized because the drama is real, not literally real, but imaginatively real. And even though he sort of uses the term imaginatively there, he's getting at sort of the imaginal realm. And the way that I like to put it is imaginal is from your head, but not in your head. Or it also ties into, see what I mean? I'm just providing examples and I'm not really saying what it is. In a lot of indigenous belief systems, they don't really make a distinction between fictions and non-fictions. Right. Because the story's power is the point, Right. Which I would argue some of our evolutionary stories about, why we have certain drives or certain things are basically like just so stories, like, those old Kipling stories about, how the leopard got its spots, or how they sort of almost fall into those similar ideas, because at the end of the day, a lot of them are theoretical. So these just so stories that we have for certain things, they sort of have the veneer of being sciencey, but they kind of are functionally the same in terms of the way that we treat them in our culture as those just so stories, like how the leopard got its spots, or how the fish got its fins, this sort of folk stories and just stories of belief around certain natural phenomena. So from your head but not in your head. Another way to look at it would be that sort of Jungian idea about there being some sort of place between physical and non-physical, right. Sort of a never land that we just don't have the tools to describe. Which I'm very fond of evoking that whenever I talk about or invoking that whenever I talk about the fact that people want to say, well, Bigfoot's got to be real and got to be physical and got to be flesh and blood because he leaves footprints, but ghosts can leave footprints too. So there's obviously non-physical phenomena can have physical impacts in the world. So where do those two things meet in the middle? The purely non-physical and the purely physical. That to me is what imaginal is.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, take a look at the phenomenon of stigmata among Christian mystics. The idea that their imagination, the idea that they are in communion with Christ in such an intimate way that they get to have the wounds that Christ suffered when he was killed and tortured in the cross. And parapsychology will say, well, that's the effect of their imagination that is so powerful that they actually managed to rip their skin and tear on the blood vessels. So can we say maybe that Bigfoot prints are some kind of like woods stigmata?
I mean, functionally, yeah. I think I mean, I would have never put it that way, but I mean, yeah, I think absolutely, and that's I think that also ties into somehow. I'm not quite there yet, but it ties into apports and angel hair that's found at UFO sites and crash debris that's found there, fairy flags, fairy chalices, fairy boots, which we do still have examples of. These like artifacts of that conform to these pop culture conceptions that we have of these things are the product of the imaginal realm, and I think it's. I know that there are plenty of people listening and think it's the goofiest thing they've ever heard, but to me, it's the one concept, the one theory that really checks all the boxes.
Yes, yeah. And Jung, I mean, when he deals with the concept of synchronicity, I mean, the concept of synchronicity, I feel, especially in the last 10 years or so, has been kind of watered down. With Jung, the idea of a synchronicity was a meaningful coincidence. So it was something that had an effect on the person, not just a, this is why I say I think there's two types of synchronicities. There's the little synchronicities, like you keep getting the same set of numbers over and over. It doesn't have a profound effect on you, but you notice it because it's unusual. And with the concept of synchronicity came, it gave the person he was talking to a breakthrough. She suddenly was like, oh my God, I now understand stuff I didn't understand. And that was the meaningful part. So it doesn't matter if it's a message from, the other side. It doesn't matter if it was entirely in someone's head, if it has that effect on them. Like whether it's, quote, real or not, or where it came from doesn't matter because the effect is real.
Yeah.
I in a little synchronicity of my own, I was writing extensively about synchronicities today. I think that's kind of the point, because like literally what I was writing today, is that a lot of the synchronicities that people end up finding profound are really kind of mundane and dopey to the person who's listening. Just like dreams. Like, I don't want to hear your dreams, folks. Like, I don't care.
I do.
But it might be. I know you do because you're a weirdo. It's just not. It's just not. I know a lot of other people feel this way. Like, dreams are not as compelling to the listener as they are to the speaker. They just never are, because there's something ineffable about them that you can't quantify. So I have a little bit more patience in that sense for the people who come to me and say, oh, it was 3:33. I saw the time. It was 3:33. That's my number. Like, I get, like, you are seeing something that I don't see because I hear you seeing 3:33, like, whenever you bring it up to me, which is like once every 3 weeks, as opposed to seeing it like twice a week or 4 times a week, whenever you look at the clock. It's those don't have quite the same staggering import that things like the plum pudding synchronicity does.
The plum pudding?
Yes. Why, I'm so glad you asked, because I have the excerpt. I have the excerpt from Jung.
All right.
A certain Monsieur Deschamps, when a boy in Orléans, was given a piece of plum pudding by a Monsieur de Forgebus. 10 years later, he discovered another plum pudding in a Paris restaurant and asked if he could have a piece. It turned out, however, that the plum pudding was already ordered by Monsieur de Forgebus. Many years afterwards, Monsieur Deschamps was invited to partake of a plum pudding as a special rarity. While he was eating it, he remarked out loud that the only thing lacking was Monsieur de Forgebus. At that moment, the door opened and an old man in the last stages of disintegration walked in. Monsieur de Forgebus, who had got hold of the wrong address and burst in on the party by mistake.
Yeah, I remember reading this one. Yeah.
If that's true, I love it so much. If it's true, I love it so much. And if it's not true, it's fun. But like, man, yeah, it's wild. I mean, I think I've mentioned my synchronicity that was almost on that level as a one-off before.
Yeah.
So yeah, with the tickets, so I won't bore anybody with that.
You're welcome to retell the story for the people who don't know, though.
Well, so this is the biggest synchronicity that I've ever had, and it was like it's notable for me because it came in like the span of like a minute and a half or something like that. But I was long story short, I was in a relationship. It was sort of on the rocks, and I was flying back from a gig in Austin, Texas. This girl had two names. We're gonna say Whitney Mary. That was her first name, last name, right? So a little bit odd. And that wasn't her literally name, but I'm hiding her name. Anyway, so Whitney Mary, she was an oboe player. She had gone to the Cincinnati Conservatory of Music. And I'm sitting there, and all I've been thinking about all weekend is this relationship. And as the plane's getting ready to take off, I'm working on a crossword puzzle, and the clue is a 4-letter word, and it turns out to be oboe. And I'm like, oh, I'm dating an oboe player. That's interesting. And then right at that moment, again, we're talking about like within 30 seconds or so, the ticket of the person in front of me drops to the ground, and I pick it up, and the final destination is Cincinnati. And he turns around. This is the kicker. He turns around and he says, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to drop that. Ticket. Can you hand it back to me?" And I see that he has 2 sleeves tattooed on him, and the names of his 2 daughters, I would assume, which are Whitney and Mary. And it was just like bam, bada bam, bada bam. Like I said, in the course of about 90 seconds, all 3 of these things after me thinking about this relationship the whole time. And it's just absolutely bonkers. Like I said, like the most profound synchronicity I've ever had in my life.
And I wonder how much the fact that you were thinking about it created that reality somehow. And if that's the case, how the hell does that work?
Yeah, I don't know, because I assume that the man was a man. Did I see tattoos that weren't there, or did I misread a tattoo because my mind was in that state? I don't know. Because the tickets and the crossword puzzle clue, not that big of a deal. People go to Cincinnati, and oboe is kind of a common crossword answer if you've done enough crossword puzzles.
Okay. So
yeah, I was a crossword puzzle nerd for a while.
One of the things I definitely wanted to get to here, and I know you had some stuff you wanted to say about this, is the treatment Travis Walton has been getting in recent months.
I have something to say about it, but it sort of alludes to my position on the matter, which is another excerpt that I'd love to read. But As far as wading into the weeds on it, I might leave that to Miguel if he's comfortable with it, because the ins and outs of why people are suddenly casting aspersions on Travis Walton, I am not intimately familiar with.
I cannot say that I know all the ins and outs either, although I have tried to read about it on several webpages, and also I listened to several episodes of Erica Luke's podcast. Well, no, actually, it's a radio show. It airs every Friday night with her co-host Scott Brown, in which they have interviewed this guy. I think his name is Ryan. I don't remember his last name right now. I think. But so this is a guy who claims to have discovered the real secret behind Travis Walton's abduction story, and this is that instead of being that the logging party that accompanied Travis on that night, I think it was November 1975, instead of seeing an actual, glowing UFO in the middle of the forest in the Sitgraves Apache natural forest, that they observed a fire tower. That they mistook a fire tower for a UFO, and that this was by design because Mike Rogers, the head of the crew, and Travis had come up with this plan to come up with this abduction story in order to win a $100,000 prize that was being offered by the National Enquirer tabloid. And there's a lot more about the story, but I won't bore the audience because it's really, really convoluted. It's really complicated. In my opinion, my own personal opinion, I'm not convinced by it because I feel it has as many moving parts as Travis, also very inconclusive and also very difficult to prove story. Like with Travis, okay, we have the testimony of these I think it's 7 guys that said they saw something weird in the forest, right? And then Travis was missing for 5 days, and there was this very elaborate manhunt or this search party that were trying to look for him, and they couldn't find him, you know. And there's also the whole thing with the lie detector test, which, in my opinion, my own personal opinion, the lie detection tests are totally irrelevant.
Yes.
I don't think that they prove anything. They only prove that the person believes he's telling the truth, and maybe, or that the person is capable of fooling the lie detection system.
Or that the person is stressed by the question.
Or that the person is stressed by the question, exactly, and you get a false positive.
Yeah.
Right? And there's obviously people who have also accused Travis of failing other lie detection tests in the past, especially during a TV show in which he participated in order to win a cash prize. This idea that Travis has tried to profit from his UFO experience is something that is being brought many, many times. And it's not that I deny it. I mean, I'm sure that, Travis has tried to, I don't know if making a living out of just being a UFO personality, but yeah, he makes the rounds in the lecture circuit. He gets paid for it. He also got paid for the movie Fire in the Sky.
Right.
I think he was released in, I want to say 1993, or maybe, I think it was 1993.
Was it 93? Okay.
And so there's this whole thing, you know, and also aside from that, there is a very old and very bitter quarrel between Mike and Travis due to a whole of, you know, family bickering and things. I mean, for a while they were brother-in-laws. I guess they're still brother-in-laws because I think officially Travis has not divorced Mike's sister. And there's a lot of other very nasty and very uncomfortable things surrounding that I will not get into. But I feel that into that, there's also people who have never believed in Travis' story, and that, you know, the biggest skeptics that got embroiled with that, and new people who got involved with this this attempt to debunk the story, which got a hold of attention from certain sectors of ufology who, I guess, never believed in Travis' story in the beginning. And to be fair, Travis' story is kind of peculiar. We're talking about these cases that really don't seem to fit the pattern of what you will call the typical abduction scenario. And if you think about it, Travis' story doesn't fit the typical abduction scenario at all. You know, first he was missing more than, instead of just a few hours, he was missing for days.
Yeah.
And second, he regained consciousness within the craft he started to almost like pick a fight, like a bar fight with the aliens, and trying to break a glass, like in a bar, in a Western bar, like, why you call me? But he couldn't, and then he like wandered off inside the craft, and he got into the control chair and started messing around with the controls. It's almost, it's almost unbelievable. Well, and I guess to many people it is unbelievable.
Well, keep in mind that Philip Glass also offered one of them, I don't know, like $5,000 or something to say it was a fake story, and they turned him down.
Well, there is that, and there are people who are saying, yeah, Philip Glass offered this money to one of these guys, but I have actually read the transcript of a phone conversation between Glass and this guy. I think he's Steve Pierce. So what this transcript says is that Glass never actually offered the money. Glass offered money to disprove the case, I guess, and another person, a third party, approached Steve and said, hey, by the way, there's this guy who's offering a lot of money if you just back down from the story.
Okay.
And the interest of that third party is that I think they were like a sheriff deputy or something, and I guess they wanted to run for sheriff. So maybe they thought their chances to win the election will increase if he managed to solve this case, which had gathered so much attention and also so much controversy in the community. So I guess there are a lot of people who resented all the attention gathered by Travis' disappearance. So that's my take, that Philip Glass actually never directly offered this money to Steve Pierce.
When I look at Travis's case, and I've said this before, to me, that area they were in is an area that has an exceptionally high level of lightning strikes. I think they encountered a ball of plasma. I think it jolted Travis when he got too close to it. When you get hit by that much electricity, you can't form short-term memories for up to 24 hours. So he could have gotten up and wandered off and not known where he was. And then, when I met Travis, I didn't get any sense that Travis didn't believe what he was saying at all, but he would not answer the question of what did you remember before you were hypnotized. So to me, it's entirely possible that the on the UFO story was invented during hypnosis, as much because he couldn't tell me. Maybe he doesn't know anymore.
Well, the argument against that idea, which was also proposed by Mike, actually, he at one point he said, Travis maybe got hit by the beam, and then when we drove out of there, maybe he got up and he tried to run to reach us, and then maybe he got lost, or maybe he went to his mother's cabin. But the argument that you said that maybe he just got he wandered off and got lost in the woods, is that they're saying is that in that time of the year, in that place in Arizona, the temperatures lower so much at the night that it will be very, very difficult to survive out on the open. It's actually one of the reasons why the sheriff wanted to call off the search after just 2 days, because they said, if we haven't found him by then, the chances that he's still alive
are low,
are very minimum.
Interesting.
And this is one of the things that Mike Rogers and one of Travis's brothers had to beg the sheriff to keep on the search, and that's when the sheriff reluctantly accepted, and they actually then increased the number of people. They say that there was even a helicopter that was part of the search, and they also had men on horseback. And there's also another thing that's part of this new contention is that in the book you read that Mike complained that there were no search dogs involved in searching for Travis, but now Travis apparently is saying that there were dogs that were brought from a local penitentiary that were used to search for him. And his critics are saying, see, he's now changing the story, and it has to be pointed out, that okay, this new thing that Travis is saying in recent interviews differs from what is written in the book Fire in the Sky, which is the new version of the original book, which was the Travis Walton Experience that was published in, I want to say, 1976.
Interesting. Him changing that, though, I mean, it's been a long time. He might just be misremembering.
Yeah. I mean, and this idea of looking into these details to say, see, and this, he said this thing, and now he said this other thing, and therefore, we can say with any certainty that he's lying.
Right.
Because this is not just saying, okay, he faked the event. There's also saying that Mike and Travis' brother, and there's also the idea that there's another accomplice that is anonymous, that is the one who was on top of the fire tower and used one of their searchlights in order to fake or to create this idea that Travis was hit by the beam. So who that person is, the skeptics who are attacking Travis cannot say. And they say that the reason why this person hasn't come forward is because maybe they would be imputable of a charge because they were using federal property in order to, create this hoax. I don't know. But anyway, the idea is that, and on top of the hoax, that they were lying to the authorities in order to continue with the ruse, and they also that they actually took the authorities to a different location. They say, "Oh, this is where Travis was abducted," instead of the actual place where the fire tower is located, which is I think is like 5 miles away from the quote-unquote original abduction site.
So, Josh, what do you have to say about all this?
I don't care. So, I mean, I take the stance that I'm more interested, again, in the expression of these archetypes, the expression of these myth themes, and I think on the one hand, it lends credibility to Travis's story that it so resembles what I'm about to read here. But on the other hand, even if he did make it up, I find it interesting that these motifs and these motifs and archetypes, take a shot every time I say it, folks. These motifs and these archetypes keep on manifesting, even in a hoaxer story. I would still find that fascinating. So this is a smidge long. It's not super long, but it's an excerpt that was collected by Claude Lecouteux, my favorite non-paranormalist, former historian of medieval literature at the Sorbonne. And I love his books, so anybody who wants to look him up, please do so. He reprints in full an extract from Renward Sisat's Collections, which is an older compendium of events in this case attributed to the supernatural kidnapping by evil spirits. Lekuto sees some resemblance given the fact that it takes place on a battlefield and there's a sound that's associated with it. He connects it to the wild hunt, which is the reason that I found it. But I'd like for you to take some note of how this resembles the Walton story 303 years before the event, almost to the day, actually, because it was in November. On the 15th of November in 1572, a compatriot, Hans Buchmann, nicknamed Crispüller, an inhabitant of Romersville in the jurisdiction of Rothenburg, then aged 50 and someone I knew well, suddenly disappeared. This sparked keen agitation and to-do among the authorities. He had 2 grown sons. His wife knew their father was going to Simpach that day, and she noted that he was not back yet and that it was getting late. She sent their sons out to look for him and bring him home, fearing that he might have stopped too long to drink. Their sons went off and made their way to the forest, where the Battle of Simpach had taken place. There they found scattered on the edge of the path, here and there, their father's hat, cloak, gloves, and sword and its scabbard, which frightened them. Their suspicions immediately turned to Klaus Buchmann, their neighbor and their father's closest relative, who had been quarreling with him for years, as his possible murderer. They gathered their father's effects and brought them home, and their mother began to weep and moan. The neighbors began to do likewise, confirming the suspicion. The sons hastened to Klaus's house to find and kill him. They looked everywhere in his house, even in the smoke cellar, to see if he might not have buried the body somewhere, but they found nothing. They brought the affair to the authorities and demanded that Klaus be arrested. Nothing was discovered in his home, and as his reputation was spotless, he was released. 4 weeks later, it was learned that the missing man had been seen in Milan, but no more. Finally, on Candlemas of 1573, he returned home, bald, beardless, his eyebrows gone, and his face and head so swollen and puffed up and so dreadful to look upon that only those closest to him could recognize him. Once the authorities got wind of his return, they had him arrested and interrogated once or twice. I was present and recorded the course of these discussions in the register of the clerk's office. They scolded him for the trouble he had caused by vanishing in such a dangerous and wicked fashion. They told him that he had intentionally and hatefully caused his cousin to bear suspicions of being a murderer, which had caused him much suffering and placed him in a difficult position. This is how he responded. He had taken 16 florins the day of his disappearance, thinking to pay back a man he was not able to find. He had then gone to Simpach on business, lingered there into the evening, and had a little to drink. He then sought to return home, and he made his way back into the forest, where he had reached the spot mentioned above as night was falling, when he suddenly heard a strange noise, a tumult that in the beginning sounded like a swarm of bees, but as it drew closer, it resembled more the sound of many stringed instruments. This din so terrified him that he no longer knew where he was or what was happening. He then got a grip on himself, drew his sword, and began striking around him. At that moment he was stripped of reason, sword, cloak, hat, and gloves, and he was carried off through the air into a foreign land, which he did not recognize, having never been there before. He did not know where it was. He felt pain, and his face and head had become swollen, and he had lost his hair and beard. Finally, 15 days after his disappearance, on the eve of St. Andrew's Day, he found himself in Milan. He had no idea how he had arrived there, but had recovered some of his reason, although he had apparently gone some days with no food or drink, and was now in a weakened and downtrodden state. He did not recognize the city, for he had never been there before, and because he did not know the language, he could not understand anyone. And then it goes on to discuss his return from Milan. That to me sounds a lot like the Travis Walton case.
Yeah, in part, definitely.
You have this incident in the forest. I don't believe that there was a sound of bees associated with Walton, but there may have been.
There was a sound like a reading machine, I think, which the new skeptics are saying that it was the generator next to at the foot of the fire tower. And now it's interesting how none of the witnesses, to my mind, they were never able to see that the sound didn't actually come from the object, but it come from above, from below it. I don't know. Well, one of those things.
Plus, to say that these guys wouldn't have recognized that this was just light coming from a fire tower.
Yeah.
Yes, I know one of the things that really bothered me is the argument of this guy saying, well, when I drove there and I saw that thing, and to me it really looked like a UFO. That's why I figured this out. I said, well, so if it managed to fool you, or it managed to look to you as a UFO, ergo, you mean that everybody else would have reached the same conclusion. Even people like 40 years ago, in which maybe the idea of UFOs wouldn't have been that present,
right,
in the culture. So and I want to make clear that I am not making any criticisms towards Erica Luke or Scott Brown. I respect them as UFO researchers. In this instance, we disagree, but I don't think they are, in some kind of like a personal crusade to try to destroy Travis.
Right.
But I do feel that there are people that are out there who seem to be in some kind of like a plan to try to erode, I guess, Travis's credibility, and they are taking into advantage all these very old bickering between Travis and Mike. And my own personal opinion is that Mike Rogers is a very unstable individual. That his claims are not to be trusted. And I feel that at this point, Mike will be able to say anything in order to hurt Travis, including even taking blame for this alleged hoax that he claims that he helped Travis to orchestrate.
Right. Well, we are out of time. You guys want to stick around for a Patreon?
Sure.
All right. Where can people find you guys? Miguel?
Well, thank you. Well, you can find me at the Daily Grail, www.dailygrail.com. My own personal webpage is absurdbydesign.com. It's where you can see my artwork, links to interviews such as these. And also, I want to say that very soon, a few friends and I, Josh is actually one of those friends, are going to announce this project that we've been cooking for a long time. And we're very excited to finally be able to release it. And it is not a UFO book, but it is about ufology and the history of ufology and the people involved in this history of ufology. And it's also something that combines the esoteric practices. And I really hope that people will enjoy it, will be excited about it, and will support us once we announce it.
All right. And Josh?
You can find me at joshuacutchin.com. And exactly what Miguel said with that new project. My collection of essays on fairy films is nigh, I've been informed, so I'll make sure everybody knows about that when it comes out. Nice. And I'm still plugging away on a 2-parter book that should be out sometime next year early.
All right. Thank you both.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I want to take a moment here to give a shout out to all of my Patreons, especially those pledging $10 or more every month. Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Eric Hervin, Tim, Andrew Nichols, 100th Monkey Project, A.E. Gaia Quinta, Alex Whitcomb, Alfred Tuttle, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy Incommunicable, Chris Ernst, Craig Cisternos, Craig Parmenter, David Moore, Denise Sarek, Diane B., Dominic O'Malley, Duffy Dowder, Edu Camahort, MTK, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, J. Otto Bullet, James Lattimore, Johanna Rojas, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Kevin L., Layla Malden, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, Mark Bowley, Mark Brady, Matt in Delaware, Patricia W., Paul Jeffries, Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Roger Gonzalez, Sam Sharon, Sedgder, Stone Wilderness, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, 36 Dingo, Tyler Glimstead, Walker, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, William Lovelace, Ren Collier, Stephen D., and Vincent Treewell. And an extra special thanks to Vincent for writing up recaps of every week's show. Thank you all so very much. You really do make this show possible.
In 2019, the first Strange Realities Conference took place in Nashville, Tennessee. The pandemic and turmoil of the following year could not stop 2020's conference from thriving in cyberspace as a live streaming event. Now, for 2021, the third annual Strange Realities Conference will combine these worlds into a paranormal hybrid event, live in person in Nashville and streaming online. Join us in exploring just how truly strange our reality can be with an interdimensional lineup of speakers presenting unique and intellectual perspectives on magic, mysteries, and the paranormal.
Featuring Alan Greenfield, Dr. J. Michael Bennett, aka Dr. Future, Tim Banal, Seriah Ascaf, Dr. Stephen Finley, Aaron Gullius, Amy Pachula, Brent Rains, Chris Ernst, Heather Mosier, Michael Hughes, Jose Herrera, Joshua Cutchin, Kiki Dombrowski, Nathan Isaac, P.D. Newman, Steven Snyder, aka Recluse, David Metcalf, Timothy Renner, Steve Stockton, and Ren Collier. Tickets available at strangerealities.conference.com.
It's going to be amazing.
There's, of course, a lengthy Patreon segment continuing this conversation with Joshua and Red Pill Junkie. That will be up later in the week. If you're a Patreon, and you can become a Patreon at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Just click on the big Patreon banner, and that will take you there. It's only $3 a month. It helps us out immensely. You have no idea how much it helps out getting this show up on a very regular basis. There's been literally one show every single week since the beginning of 2013. I have so far, not to jinx myself, never missed a week. And many times there's more than one show up a week. But there's been at least one every single week. And almost every week you get an extra Patreon show as well. That's a continuation of the conversation, in most cases, from the main show. I'll see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.